The room is dimly lit. A single desk lamp casting long shadows across the walls. Stacks of case files clutter the desk, each labeled with bold red stamps. Debunked. Hoax. Explained. This is James Holloway's world. For over 2 decades, James has walked the fine line between belief and skepticism. A self-proclaimed investigator of the paranormal, but not a believer. He breathes deeply, his fingers tracing the edge of an old photograph pinned to his corkboard. A family huddled together in front of a decrepit house, their faces pale with fear. This, he whispers to himself, is where fear meets reason. His voice carries a weight of certainty, but beneath it, there's something else. Doubt. Or perhaps curiosity. James wasn't always this way. There was a time when he believed in things unseen. When shadows in the dark were more than just tricks of the mind. But years of investigation stripped away the mystery. Every ghostly figure was just a shadow, every eerie sound just creaking wood or faulty wiring. He leans back in his chair, staring at the wall behind his desk. It's covered with relics from past cases. A cracked EMF meter that once spiked near an abandoned asylum. An EVP recorder filled with static and whispers that turned out to be wind through broken windows. People see what they want to see, he mutters softly, his tone flat yet resolute. But even as he speaks, his eyes linger on one file tucked away in the corner of his desk. Unopened, untouched for years. It's labeled simply, Millhaven, 1998. James shakes his head, pulling himself back to the present. He doesn't dwell on that case anymore, or so he tells himself. The phone rings suddenly, slicing through the silence like a knife. James exhales slowly before answering, his voice calm but detached, Holloway. The voice on the other end trembles, desperate and afraid. There's something in my house, they stammer. It's not just noises, it's something real. James rolls his eyes slightly but keeps his tone professional. Have you checked for drafts? Rodents? Faulty wiring, he asks, already preparing to dismiss the claim. But then, there's a pause on the line. No, the caller whispers finally. You don't understand, it's her. James sits up straighter, his brow furrowing. Who? He asks cautiously. The witch, comes the reply, barely audible over the static creeping into the call. For a moment, James says nothing. His skepticism warring with something deeper, something he hasn't felt in years. Curiosity. He glances at his gear bag sitting by the door, cameras, recorders, meters, all tools of logic and reason. All right, he says finally, his voice steady but low. I'll take a look. As he hangs up, James allows himself a small smirk. Just another case, he mutters under his breath. But deep down, something about this feels different. The air in the room seems heavier now, as if even speaking her name has awakened something long dormant. And for the first time in years, James feels just a flicker of unease. The road winds through dense, ancient woods. Branches twist overhead, forming a canopy that blocks out the moonlight. The air is heavy, still, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. And then it appears. A small town nestled in the valley below, its dim streetlights flickering like dying embers. This is Black Hollow, a place forgotten by time. Its cobblestone streets are lined with weathered buildings, their facades cracked and leaning. Once grand, now crumbling under the weight of centuries. The town square sits eerily quiet. At its center, a gnarled oak tree towers over everything, its twisted branches clawing at the sky. They call it the hanging tree. Locals avoid it, their eyes darting away whenever they pass. But its roots run deep, deeper than anyone dares to imagine. Black Hollow was founded in the late 1600s during the height of the witch trials, a time when fear and superstition ruled over reason. Whispers of dark rituals and forbidden magic spread like wildfire through the town. Neighbors turned on neighbors, accusations flew, lives were destroyed. Legends say that 13 women were hanged beneath that very oak tree. Their crimes: consorting with the devil, practicing witchcraft, defying the church. But not all of them went quietly. One of them, Margaret Bellamy, cursed the town with her dying breath. "They will never forget us," she vowed as the noose tightened around her neck. "And you will never escape me." Her words lingered long after her body fell limp. And strange things began to happen in Black Hollow. Crops failed without reason. Livestock vanished overnight. Children spoke of shadowy figures watching them from the woods. And then there were the disappearances. Every few years, someone would vanish without a trace. A farmer heading home after dusk, a traveler passing through town, even children playing near the hanging tree. The townsfolk whispered that Margaret's curse was real, that her spirit still roamed Black Hollow, seeking vengeance. Modern-day Black Hollow tries to bury its history beneath a facade of normalcy. There's a diner on Main Street, a gas station at the edge of town, even a small library with peeling paint and broken windows. But those who live here know better than to speak of what came before. They know better than to wander too far after dark. Because in Black Hollow, history isn't just something you read about in books. It's alive. It breathes in every shadow, every creak of an old floorboard, every gust of wind that rattles your windows at night. And for James Holloway, skeptical investigator of all things paranormal, Black Hollow is about to become far more than just another case. The atmosphere in James's office shifts. As he stares at the wall of case files, the phone rings again, its shrill tone cutting through the silence. He glances at the caller ID. An unknown number, a spark of curiosity igniting within him. "Hello," he answers, his voice steady but cautious. The line crackles with static before a trembling voice breaks through. Is this James Holloway?" "Yes, it is," he replies, leaning forward in his chair. "Who's calling?" There's a pause. A soft sob echoes through the receiver, sending a shiver down his spine. "My name is Sarah," the voice finally says, barely above a whisper. "I need your help. Something is happening in my house." James raises an eyebrow, intrigued yet skeptical. "What kind of something?" he asks, his tone professional. "It's hard to explain," Sarah continues, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Things are moving on their own. I hear whispers at night, and I feel like I'm being watched." James suppresses a sigh. He's heard it all before, people letting their imaginations run wild. But something in her voice catches his attention. "Have you checked for drafts? Old pipes? Maybe even rodents," he suggests, trying to ground her fears in reality. "No. You don't understand," she insists, her voice rising with urgency. "There's an old abandoned house down the street, and I think it's connected." His interest piqued, James leans back in his chair. "Connected how?" "I saw someone standing in the window last night," she breathes, fear lacing her words. "A woman. considers her words. The town's history of witchcraft flashes through his mind, stories of spirits lingering long after their deaths. "Sarah," he says slowly, "I need you to stay calm. I'll come by and take a look at this house." "Thank you," she replies, relief washing over her voice. "But please, be careful. There's something wrong there." As they hang up, James feels a mix of skepticism and intrigue brewing inside him. He glances at his gear bag, cameras, recorders, tools of logic and reason, ready for another investigation. But this time feels different. He stands up, pacing the room as he considers what lies ahead. The air feels charged, heavy with anticipation. With each step toward the door, he can't shake the feeling that Black Hollow holds secrets waiting to be uncovered. As he grabs his bag and heads out into the night, a sense of unease settles over him, a whisper of doubt that perhaps this case will challenge everything he believes. As James pulls up to the old abandoned house, a chill runs down his spine, despite the warm summer air. The house stands alone at the end of a winding dirt road. Its weathered facade is cloaked in shadows, the moonlight barely illuminating its cracked windows, like hollow eyes watching him approach. He steps out of his car, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. Each step feels heavy, as if the ground itself is reluctant to let him pass. The air is thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves, and the distant hoot of an owl echoing through the night. James takes a moment to survey his surroundings. The yard is overgrown, wild weeds and thorny brambles encroaching upon the path. A rusty gate creaks ominously as he pushes it open, its hinges protesting like a long-forgotten secret begging to be left undisturbed. He approaches the front porch, where paint peels like old skin. The wood groans underfoot, each sound amplified in the stillness. A shiver runs through him as he reaches for the door, his fingers brushing against the cold metal doorknob. "Here goes nothing," he mutters to himself, taking a deep breath. As he steps inside, darkness envelopes him like a shroud. The musty scent of decay hits him hard, a reminder that this place has been abandoned for years. His flashlight beam cuts through the gloom, revealing cobwebs draping from the ceiling. Dust motes dance in the light, swirling like lost souls trapped in this forsaken space. Every corner seems to hold a story, a memory of what once was. James can almost hear whispers carried on the breeze, echoes of laughter and sorrow that linger in the air. He moves cautiously through the foyer, taking in every detail. The wallpaper peels away in large strips, revealing faded patterns beneath, ghosts of another time. An old chandelier hangs precariously above him, its crystals clinking softly as if stirred by unseen hands. "Why do I always end up in places like this?" he muses aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. But deep down, he knows why. It's not just about proving or disproving ghosts, it's about understanding what haunts us, both in life and in death. As he ventures deeper into the house, shadows flicker at the edge of his vision, just out of reach, teasing him with their presence. The atmosphere grows heavier with each step he takes, a sense of foreboding settling over him like a thick fog. And then he hears it, a soft creaking sound from upstairs, a whisper that seems to call his name. "James." He pauses, heart racing, breath itching in his throat. Was it just his imagination? Or was there truly something waiting for him in this house? With renewed determination, he grips his flashlight tighter, ready to confront whatever lies ahead. Unbeknownst to him, Black Hollow holds secrets that will challenge everything he believes. James stands in the dimly lit foyer of the old house, his heart still racing from the eerie atmosphere that envelopes him. He takes a deep breath. The musty air fills his lungs, grounding him as he prepares for what lies ahead. Setting his gear down on a dusty table, he begins to unpack. Each piece of equipment carefully selected for this investigation. First, he pulls out his camera, a high-definition model equipped with night vision capabilities. He checks the battery, ensuring it's fully charged. Can't have any dead batteries tonight, he mutters to himself, his voice echoing softly in the stillness. Next, he retrieves his EVP recorder, a device designed to capture electronic voice phenomena. Voices from beyond, whispers from the shadows. He presses a button to test it. The familiar beep reassures him that it's working. Let's see if you can pick up anything unusual, he says. Setting it down on a nearby shelf, its red light blinking steadily. As he sets up his equipment, James feels a sense of purpose wash over him. This is what he does best, documenting the unknown, dissecting fear with logic. He moves through the house, placing cameras strategically in each room. One in the living room, aimed at the old fireplace where shadows seem to linger. Another in the hallway, capturing any movement that might slip through the darkness. With each camera positioned, he can't shake the feeling that he's being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stand on end as he glances over his shoulder. But there's nothing there, just silence and shadows. Focus, James, he whispers to himself, shaking off the unease. He sets up an EMF meter next, placing it on a table near the staircase. It flickers to life, its needle dancing slightly, responding to something unseen. As he finishes setting up, he takes a moment to survey the room. Dust particles float lazily in the beam of his flashlight. And for a brief moment, he imagines they are spirits trapped in this forgotten space. All right, he says aloud, trying to bolster his confidence. It's time to see what you've got for me. He switches on all devices, feeling a thrill of anticipation mixed with dread. The house seems to hold its breath, waiting for him to make his next move. James steps back into the center of the room, feeling both empowered and vulnerable. With everything in place, he knows there's no turning back now. As he prepares to begin his investigation, a soft creaking sound echoes from above, a reminder that he is not alone. Let's see if you're really here, he murmurs under his breath, his heart pounding in rhythm with the anticipation building within him. As James stands in the dimly lit living room, a heavy silence envelopes him, the kind that presses against your chest and makes you question every creak of the old house. He takes a moment to gather his thoughts. The air feels thick, charged, as if something is waiting. Then it happens. A soft thud echoes from upstairs. James's heart skips a beat, his breath hitching in his throat. Just the house settling, he whispers to himself, trying to quell the rising unease. But deep down, he knows better. He grips his flashlight tighter, shining it toward the staircase. The beam flickers across the worn steps, shadows dancing in the corners of his vision. He takes a cautious step forward. And then, another noise, a faint whisper, barely audible. James. His pulse quickens as he strains to listen. Was it just his imagination? Or was there truly something lurking in the darkness? Determined to find out, he moves toward the stairs, each step echoing in the stillness. As he ascends, a sudden chill sweeps through the air, a stark contrast to the warmth of the summer night outside. James pauses on the landing, feeling goosebumps rise on his arms. The temperature has dropped significantly, almost unnaturally so. He pulls out his EMF meter, watching as the needle spikes erratically. Something's here, he murmurs, a mix of excitement and dread coursing through him. Suddenly, a loud bang reverberates through the hallway behind him, a door slamming shut. James spins around, heart racing, adrenaline flooding his veins. "Hello," he calls out, trying to sound brave, but his voice trembles slightly. Silence answers him, thick and suffocating. He steps cautiously down the hall, flashlight beams slicing through the darkness. And then he hears it again, a soft rustling sound coming from one of the rooms. With every step closer, he feels an invisible weight pressing down on him. A sense of foreboding that tightens around his chest. James pushes open the door to a small bedroom. The air inside is colder still, a biting chill that sends shivers down his spine. His flashlight flickers over old furniture draped in white sheets. And then he sees it, a shadow flitting across the far wall. "Show yourself," he demands, trying to summon courage from somewhere deep within. But instead of an answer, he hears another whisper, this time clearer. "Leave this place." A wave of fear washes over him as he realizes how vulnerable he truly is. He's alone in this house, surrounded by echoes of a past that refuses to remain buried. As he steps back toward the door, the temperature drops even further, and suddenly he feels as if he's being watched intently. James turns to leave, but stops short when a picture frame on the wall falls with a crash. Glass shatters at his feet, and in that moment, everything changes. He stumbles back, heart pounding wildly against his rib cage. This is no longer just an investigation, it's a confrontation with something far more sinister. With renewed urgency, James races back downstairs, determined to uncover what lies beneath this house's dark facade. But deep down, he knows that whatever is haunting Black Hollow has only just begun to reveal itself. The attic door looms before James, its wood warped and splintered with age. A faint draft seeps through the cracks, carrying with it a scent of dust and something else. Something ancient. He hesitates for a moment, his hand resting on the cold brass knob. The house has been unsettling enough, but the attic... It feels different, heavier, as though it holds secrets that should remain buried. With a deep breath, he pushes the door open. The hinges groan loudly, protesting against years of neglect. The beam of his flashlight cuts through the darkness, illuminating a space frozen in time. Dust hangs thick in the air, swirling like restless spirits disturbed by his intrusion. Old trunks and crates are stacked haphazardly, their surfaces covered in cobwebs. A broken rocking chair sits in one corner, its seat sagging as if weighed down by invisible memories. James steps inside cautiously, each footfall stirring up clouds of dust. The floor creaks beneath him, every sound amplified in the oppressive silence. As he scans the room, his flashlight catches something glinting in the far corner. An ornate chest, its brass fittings tarnished but still gleaming faintly in the light. He kneels before it, running his fingers over the intricate carvings etched into its surface. Symbols he doesn't recognize, circles and runes that seem to pulse faintly under his touch. With trembling hands, he lifts the lid. Inside lies a collection of objects that send a chill down his spine. A bundle of dried herbs tied with fraying twine, their scent still potent after all these years. A blackened candle, its wax melted into strange shapes as if burned during some ancient ritual. A leather-bound book, its cover cracked and worn but still exuding an aura of power. James picks up the book carefully, brushing away decades of dust to reveal faded lettering on its cover. Grimoire. His breath catches as he flips through its pages, filled with handwritten spells and diagrams, each one more disturbing than the last. At the bottom of the chest lies something even more unsettling. A doll, crudely made from straw and cloth, its button eyes staring lifelessly at him. As he reaches for it, a sudden chill sweeps through the attic, far colder than before. The hairs on his arms stand on end as an overwhelming sense of dread washes over him. And then he hears it. A faint whisper, so soft it's almost imperceptible. Leave. James freezes, his heart pounding in his chest. The whisper grows louder, echoing around him as if coming from every corner of the attic. He drops the doll back into the chest and stumbles to his feet, backing away toward the door. But just as he turns to leave, something catches his eye, a shadow moving across the wall, independent of any light source. Who's there? He demands, his voice shaking despite his attempt to sound brave. The attic remains silent, but James knows he's not alone anymore. Clutching his flashlight tightly, he retreats down the stairs, his mind racing with questions about what he's just uncovered. These artifacts aren't just relics of Black Hollow's dark past. They're evidence of something far more sinister, something that refuses to stay buried. And James is beginning to realize that whatever haunts this house isn't done with him yet. James stands in the center of the living room, his breath steady but shallow. The house feels different now, heavier, alive. He glances at his equipment, neatly arranged and humming softly with power. The cameras blink their red recording lights, the EMF meter hums faintly, and the EVP recorder sits ready to capture any whispers from beyond. But then, it begins. The EMF meter spikes suddenly, its needle slamming to the far end of the scale. James freezes, watching as the device flickers erratically before going silent. What the hell? He mutters under his breath, stepping closer to inspect it. Before he can touch it, the EVP recorder crackles to life. A burst of static fills the room, followed by faint whispers, indistinct, layered voices overlapping one another. Is someone there? James asks cautiously, his voice trembling ever so slightly. The whispers stop abruptly, replaced by a deep, guttural hiss that sends a chill down his spine. And then, silence. James reaches for the recorder, but as soon as his fingers graze its surface, it shuts off completely. The red light dies, leaving him in an even deeper void of sound. One by one, his devices begin to fail. The camera's recording lights blink sporadically before fading to black. His thermal imaging device emits a high-pitched whine before powering down entirely. No, 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 James mutters frantically, flipping switches and checking connections. But it's no use, everything is dead. He pulls out his flashlight to check the wiring on one of the cameras. And that's when the beam begins to flicker. Not now, he whispers, shaking it desperately as shadows creep closer around him. Suddenly, a loud crash echoes from upstairs, a sound like furniture being overturned. James spins toward the staircase, heart pounding in his chest. Hello, he calls out into the darkness, his voice barely above a whisper. No response. The flashlight sputters again before plunging him into total darkness. James stands frozen in place, gripping the useless device tightly as fear begins to claw at him. The oppressive silence is broken only by his own ragged breathing. Until he hears it, a faint tapping sound coming from somewhere above him. Tap, tap, tap. It grows louder, closer, rhythmic and deliberate. James fumbles for his backup flashlight, but his hands are shaking too much to grip it properly. When he finally switches it on, the beam is weak, barely cutting through the suffocating gloom. He glances at his watch instinctively, but even that has stopped ticking. Time itself seems frozen within these walls. I'm not alone, he whispers to himself, trying to steady his nerves. But deep down, he knows that whatever is here doesn't want him to leave. As he takes a cautious step toward the staircase, the tapping stops abruptly, replaced by an eerie stillness that feels almost worse than the noise. James swallows hard, gripping his flashlight like a lifeline. His equipment may have failed him, but he knows this investigation is far from over. And now, he's completely on his own. James stands in the center of the living room, his breathing shallow and uneven. The oppressive air around him feels heavier now, pressing against his chest like an invisible weight. He reaches into his bag with trembling hands, pulling out the protective items he's relied on in countless investigations. A small vial of salt, a sprig of sage, and a rusted iron nail. This has worked before, he whispers to himself, his voice barely audible over the creaking of the house. It'll work again. The room grows colder as he begins to sprinkle a circle of salt around himself. Each grain falling like a barrier between him and the unseen force that lurks in the shadows. He lights the sage, its sharp, earthy scent cutting through the stale air. The smoke curls upward, twisting unnaturally as if resisting his attempts to cleanse the space. By this circle of protection, James begins, his voice steady but low. I command you to reveal yourself. The house responds with a groan, a deep, guttural sound that seems to come from its very foundation. The walls tremble slightly, and James feels the floor shift beneath his feet. And then, she appears. At first, it's just a shadow at the edge of his vision, flickering and indistinct. But as he turns to face her, her form solidifies into something far more terrifying than he could have imagined. Her figure is cloaked in darkness, her hollow eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Her face, twisted and inhuman, contorts into a grotesque grin as she steps closer to him. You think your charms can protect you, she hisses, her voice echoing like nails on glass. You are nothing but a child playing with fire. James grips the iron nail tightly in his hand, holding it out as if it could ward her off. Stay back, he shouts, his voice cracking under the weight of his fear. But she doesn't stop. The salt circle around him begins to scatter as if swept away by an unseen force. The sage burns faster now, its smoke thickening and choking the air around him. You came here looking for answers, she says, her tone mocking and cold. Now you'll find them, but they won't save you. James feels an icy chill run down his spine as she raises one skeletal hand toward him. The symbol on his arm, the mark she left, begins to burn fiercely, glowing with an otherworldly light. He screams in pain, but refuses to back down. With every ounce of courage he has left, he throws the iron nail toward her form. But it passes through her like smoke. Her laughter fills the room now, louder and more menacing than ever before. You cannot fight me, she whispers, her voice soft yet deafening in his ears. This house is mine, and now, so are you. James stumbles backward as reality begins to warp around him again, walls bending and twisting unnaturally. He clutches at his chest, gasping for air as he realizes that everything he brought with him, every charm, every tool, has failed. And now, there's nowhere left to run. The early morning sun casts a pale light over the abandoned house. Its windows, dark and lifeless, seem to stare back at the world with quiet malice. A pair of police cars pull up to the overgrown driveway, their engines humming softly before falling silent. Two officers step out, their boots crunching against the gravel as they exchange uneasy glances. "This is the place," one of them asks, his voice low, almost hesitant. The other nods, gripping his flashlight tightly. "Yeah, neighbors reported strange noises a few nights ago. No one's seen Holloway since." They approach the front door cautiously, its weathered surface hanging slightly ajar. The air feels colder here, unnaturally so. Inside, the house is eerily quiet, save for the faint creak of floorboards beneath their weight. Dust hangs heavy in the air, undisturbed, as if time itself has stopped within these walls. "James," one officer calls out, his voice echoing through the empty rooms. No response. They begin their search methodically, moving from room to room. In the living room, they find his equipment, cameras toppled over, wires tangled in disarray. The EVP recorder sits on a table, its battery drained, but still faintly warm to the touch. One officer picks it up and frowns. It's like he just vanished. As they climb the creaking staircase to the second floor, an unsettling feeling settles over them. The air grows heavier with each step, as though something unseen is watching from the shadows. In one of the bedrooms, they find a mirror cracked down the center. But it's what's captured on James's camera footage, discovered later, that will haunt them forever.